off, welcome everybody to this panel on how to get published, and there we go with the mic again, in indie comics. Welcome everybody, hopefully you're having a great con. If you notice real quick before I even get started with anything, these are all comic book people, and I'm this weirdo over here that's normally in podcasting, and I'll get to why that is that I'm on this panel at a later time. But what I first would like to do is have everybody just introduce themselves real briefly and, just talk about a little bit about what you're doing right this second. So I'm gonna start on the end with Chris. Chris, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I wrote it down and I literally got confused about the instructions.
It happens. Right kind of thing. So my name is Chris Hamer, and I go by Urban Pop. It's my art studio. I'm currently working on a book called Adventures of Byron for Scout Comics. I'm also a cover artist for Scout. I've been doing it for, I'm on my 4th issue now. Also working for Scoot, which is an imprint for them. And then when I'm not drawing, I'm doing conventions, and I tattoo here in Atlanta. So.
Oh, nice.
My 2 cents worth.
Which shop you at? Can I get you?
Aladdin
Sure.
tattoo.
I did a guest spot at Leafy Dagger.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
This is an amazing.
Yeah, that shop is so great too.
Mhm.
I brought all my stuff and you can have anything here.
Yeah.
Pretty much all you need is a machine, your power supply.
I'll sit wherever. I'll stand up.
I'll pop this one between you here. For sure. And it's easy for him to get in and share between you. There you go. Sorry about that.
Sorry I'm late.
No,
Couldn't find the room.
all right. And then next up, Ben.
I'm Benny Powell. I do General Whipping Point, as I guess the reality, but I'm the writer for White Widow is the most popular. I don't know if you guys heard of that one. I Make Boys Cry, Wayward Legends, Wayward Sons, done some I'm the creator of Darkon, do some of the writing sometimes, Dual Identity, about 12 titles in total writing, and then I also sometimes do covers. The book I gave out to everyone, that's actually my cover, just as an example. That I did. What was fun about that one was it's actually also has Jamie's cover from White Widow #1, her ripping through, and I did, because that one was foil, red foil, I wanted to do, we're always trying to do things differently. I wanted to do 2 different foils, which no one ever does because it's expensive as hell. So I do that, and I'm also the editor, publisher for Absolute/Red Giant.
Either mic you'd like to use. Yep, just talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Todd McFarlane.
They're very hot mics.
Yeah.
When's the Spawn movie coming? Come on.
Spawn 2's happening, buddy.
It's good to meet you. That joke would have landed better if it weren't for the feedback. But
Yeah.
I'm Stephen Green. Is there a speaker firing at this?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It looks like it might be that one, but I'm not.
I do a comic with Jason Aaron called Sea of Stars. I occasionally do Hellboy stuff. I did this on your badge there.
Oh, wow.
And it's good to be here. How y'all doing?
Fantastic.
Mr. Gonzo.
I'm just going to talk at this level, like right back here, so I don't
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah.
We can hear you.
It's scary.
I'm Jay Gonzo, the creator of Mano del Destino. It's a battle luchador. I've done other stuff for like Top Cow. I did Voz de MAYO for Top Cow. I worked for Tata Rambo for 4 years, so I worked on Spawn for a bit.
He's cool.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, he's insane, but he's a good guy. I always tell people everything you think about him, it's also true. I draw stuff. I do a little bit of tattooing as well, and when to pay the bills, I do a little bit of graphic design.
Awesome. Matt.
I'm Matt Wisniewski. I did a book called The Freak from Madhouse Books. Also did another one called Static from Dark Horse. I usually write and draw my own stuff. Some hand lettering too. And I just do commissions, and I'm mostly an artist, but I do some writing. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So, as I mentioned, I'm sort of like the odd man out in this group a little bit. So, my name is Dennis Robinson. I'm mostly in the podcasting circle. So, I'm one of the creators of Botched, a D&D podcast, which is an improv comedy show that involves a lot of drinking draped in the loose skin of Dungeons and Dragons. That's kind of what it is.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, thank you. But the reason I'm actually here right now on this panel, which is kind of nice because I get to ask questions, is that yesterday I launched my first comic book ever on Kickstarter. It's almost 50% funded right now in a day and a half, which I'm super stoked about. And my dream would be if it gets funded before I leave DragonCon. That'd be awesome. So,
Make that happen.
well, I would appreciate it. I've got a little guys here, but I won't talk about it till the end anyways, because I don't want to get in. I want to take the shine away from you guys. So, part of this panel is going to be a bit of curiosity on my own part, because now I get to, get questions that I'm interested in as well. But I will also call in the audience, anything you're wondering, if we don't touch on it, feel free, raise your hand, we'll hit you up. So the first question I have, and I kind of want to get everybody's input, one after the other, is, so what is your personal experience when it comes to publishing, whether it be self-publishing through a small publishing company, or even like a bigger publishing company like a Marvel or DC or something like that?
Well, I started out self-publishing everything for probably 3 or 4 years. Just writing and drawing my own books because nothing else. Well, at first I just wanted to be an artist in comics, and I'm like, well, let me try writing. Because I was always an artist first, and just thought of myself like, I'm not a real writer, so I'll stick to what I'm better at. And so then I tried it, but I started small, just 3 pages. Oh wow, I did it.
Okay.
I don't know if it was good, but I did it. And then it started developing into a one-shot, the same 3 pages. And then just kept doing that until eventually I brought The Freak. I self-published that, and a small company called Ad House was at Heroes Con, and they noticed it and they were interested in it. So
Awesome.
yeah, I just kept self-publishing, just kept doing it, wondering if I'm insane or wasting my time.
They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They could be both true.
True.
Those are Dark
both
Knights of the
false.
Soul, though, when you're on page like 22 of a 30-page book and you're like, all you see is your artboard, like, is this for anybody? Is anybody gonna pick this up? If I just wasted a month of
So that's kind of how I started, and
Awesome.
it's gone from there.
Mr. Johnson.
I started, so I spent a good chunk of time in, I've been working in advertising and graphic design for 30 years, but I started off in advertising for probably a good decade before I started working for Todd. So I just took all of my kind of production skills and graphic design skills over to Todd and worked in developing a book. So I got to see like kind of a bigger company putting books out. Then when I left there, I decided to do my own thing and had to become a publisher to get a diamond slot. So I had a I had a LLC at that point that was my graphic design business. So I just did the DBA, that was my own imprint to have be a publishing entity to then get into Diamond. And so I did Diamond fulfillment for the first couple of issues, but unfortunately that was right when DC decided to restart their universe. So it's hard to buy Mano #2 when Superman #1's coming out if you're a comic shop owner. And I don't besmirch anyone, like their decision, they got to get the lights on at those stores. So I got kicked out of Diamond, and then I had to figure self-distribution out and all that sort of thing. And yes, I've been self-publishing books for a little more than a decade now.
Awesome. Awesome. Steven?
What's the question?
What's your experience
Oh.
with publishing, either self-publishing or even with a bigger publishing?
Yeah, I haven't self-published anything.
Okay.
I do everything through Image with our book, so
Awesome.
I'm pretty fortunate there.
Okay.
But I mean, there's a lot of stuff you do yourself. You can hire an editor. We did, but you make a lot of decisions over there, like what kind of paper you want to use or how many pages you want the book to be. But they have a pretty, well-known operation set up there, so pretty lucky with that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Benny?
I go way back. I've done kind of both. I started out I was at a convention like this. I went in wanted to be an artist. I took my portfolio to Archie Goodwin. This is mid-90s. He was an editor at DC, and he looks through my stuff, and he's like, "Oh no, keep at it, kid. Maybe someday you'll get there." And then he gets confused. He's like, "I don't recognize this story." He goes, "Where did you get this story?" I said, "Well, I didn't have any script, so I wrote it." And he goes, give me the nice backhanded compliment. He goes, "Do you ever consider maybe you're a better writer than artist?" So I go, "Well, it's next to impossible back then, especially to break in as a writer." And he said, "Well, to give you an idea how the world's changed, this was the formula back in the day." He said, "In order to do that, you become an intern, and you work for free, basically, at Marvel or DC for 6 months. Then you become, if you're good at that, you become an assistant editor, and you do that for a year or two, and then you become an associate editor, and that's when you get one title to actually edit. And then from there, what you do is quid pro quo, you hire another editor who also wants to be a writer, and you get them to hire you to write something for them as a fill-in book, and that's the long process."
Wow.
I said, "Well, that's great, but I don't know how to become an intern." And he goes, "Kid, I'm offering you an internship at DC." I went, "Oh, I'm stupid." So, so he gave me all the info and everything, and then I got sick and called him up, and he goes, I said, "I'm told I need to leave." I was in Oklahoma at the time. Turns out I'm allergic to Oklahoma. And was told to go somewhere like New York. I called him up, and because I remembered the invitation. He goes, "Well, kid, we don't have an internship for the spring semester. We only do summer internships, but they do have over at Marvel." I go, "Well, I don't know anyone at Marvel." He's, "Kid, I'm offering you, I can hook you up." Like, okay. So I got the internship working for Bob Harris during the Age of Apocalypse story timeline, and I found out that there was no rule against interns pitching stories. So since I had the inside track, I pitched What If Legion had killed Magneto, the opposite story to the What If editor, and within 2 weeks I became an official writer for Marvel, and that started my career. So far as I know, I think I'm the only intern who ever became a writer at Marvel, and did that for years until Marvel went bankrupt. Decided maybe I needed something a bit more stable. And then when I came back, what's interesting is at the time, web comics were starting to come back. I missed comics, and so I started doing web comics, and I think that's the big thing that's changed the landscape. Is now the barriers to entry are gone. So the one thing I do want to encourage is you can go out and do a webtoon or KeenSpot or any of the places out there. Build your chops, build an audience before having to venture out and then do self-publishing. Obviously now I'm a publisher, so we did that route, but that started in 2010, and we didn't start fully publishing on a regular basis until 2018. So don't feel bad if it's not. I love when people see the White Widow has sold nearly 100,000 units per issue. People go, "Oh, it's an overnight success." I'm like, 25 years is a long night. So yeah, don't get discouraged. That's the one thing.
So I've been drawing pretty much all my life, and I always wanted to be a comic book artist, and got discouraged, and bought my How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way book, and used to draw all that stuff, and just kind of always dreamed about doing it. And then I was trying to do this as a full-time artist, which I've been, but trying to draw a comic book that you're paying yourself to draw. Does it pay your bills as well? So I was making art also, and I created this little character, this little monster guy named Byron. And after a couple years of drawing him on things, somebody asked me if he had a story, and I decided that I was going to make my first comic book. And I did a Kickstarter, and it got funded in the first hour.
Wow.
And I was surprised, and so we put a comic book out. And it was all self-published. I made up my own imprint, the whole nine, and I was selling it on the trunk of my car wherever I went, you know. And I was in Denver about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and I had already started doing a cover for Scout. They're based out of Florida, and I, you know, they saw the cover, and then we were working on another book that I was gonna be part of, and while I was showing pages to them and telling them about the thing, the story, and just, you know, kind of my soft pitch at a con, which no publisher really wants to hear because they're too busy doing their thing, but they were nice enough to listen. I just kind of said, hey, did you ever see my other comic? And they were like, you've done a comic? And I told them what I just told you guys. And so I walked over to my table because we were relatively close to the convention, and I brought them a copy of the book, threw it on the table, said, here's my comic, and just kind of went about my day. And you would walk by the Scout booth as you were leaving to go out of the convention floor, and the president of Scout, James, was like, hey, we want to sign The Adventures of Byron. And, you know, this has been a 30-year-old dream of mine to draw comic books professionally of any sort. And I was like, okay, cool, awesome, thanks. And then, like, he's on the, it's like, we're really interested in the book. And I was like, okay, cool, thanks, awesome. You know, and I'm inside like, yeah, it's so awesome, you know. And so the next day, kind of a similar situation, I'm leaving. He's like, you know, we really liked the book. I read it last night. I was like, oh, cool, thanks. And then the third day, same thing. You know, last day of the con's the third day on Sunday, and he's like, hey, so when we get back into town, I'll get you a contract next week. And I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Seriously? And he's like, okay, cool. And then so next week comes up, there's no contract, and I'm like, that was awesome. He was just being nice to me. And then 2 weeks later, he writes me, he goes, dude, I've had a hell of a couple weeks. Here's your contract. And I was like, oh shit, this is real. Okay, cool. And so that's pretty much how Byron came in. And so now on my fourth issue, and it's awesome because I've gone from both ends and seen it myself to, you know, actually knowing that it's in comic stores and like hearing how Scout's grown as a company themselves and getting distribution, and then hearing the woes with Diamond and, you know, Luna and all the different the different distributors. Yeah, distribution. And so it's kind of cool to see it on both ends. And so for the longest time, I was like, all I want to do is comics. But unfortunately, if you draw comics full time on an independent level, personally, I have needed more financial gain. So I learned to do things like tattoo, and I'll make paintings and, you know, do commissions like any other guy at this table does. So it's always like the comics are there, and it's like I'll draw it, but since I don't have a monthly deadline, it allows me to have a little more space in between them, you know? So when I sit down to draw a book, I think it's just that I gotta constantly remind myself that, you know, I wanted this for so long as I got it now, so don't ever let go of it. So when you do get your book, like, don't really ever let go of it, like, no matter how much trouble it becomes, because trying to pay bills and draw comics can be challenging. But now that I've got it, it's amazing. And I started working Scout, switched gears because Byron is a kid's book or an all-ages book. So we switched from Scout to Scoot, their kids imprint. And then once you identify yourself as a kid's comic book artist, there's a whole different set of rules that I've found that change in how you have to write the book. And just like, I can't remember your name down there, but you said, yeah, Matt. You didn't really think of yourself as a writer. That's the same as like, I'm like, oh, I'm not a writer, I just draw. You know, I'm like, and I hope that my grammar is subpar, you know. But I'm on the fourth issue, and, you know. Editors. Yeah, I don't know what that was when I did this book. I was like, editor, whatever.
You don't see me working with no editor.
Yeah.
As an editor, you still need editors.
Yeah, and so since then, I've actually got an editor, which is, it's amazing. Just the learning curve, and so much you go through from like, oh, I can do this myself, to now I've got to do this for somebody else. And then there's all kinds of little ins and outs that I picked up from it. But yeah, it's pretty amazing getting to be at this point. Like, I finally saw my name in previews, and you know, like, you know, bought 10 copies for my mother, kind of thing. I'm like, look what I got. She's like, what is this? And I'm like, get some. Yeah, never mind. So Yeah.
So the rest of this panel, I'm thinking, can be a little bit more discussion than necessarily like bop, 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 bop sort of thing. But one of the big questions I have, so, you know, what is your recommendation, especially for somebody starting out? Is it try and go the way of a larger publisher like Image, which is still it's not the big two, but it's still a larger publisher.
Yeah, I think it's number 3.
Number 3, okay. Or
But
try.
it's by a huge. There's a huge gulf between the
Okay.
second
Yeah,
and third.
75% of comic books sold in America come from DC or Marvel.
Mhm.
Like it's
Yeah, the Image is like 10, I think.
Okay. So what would be, you know, your recommendation? And like I said, it doesn't have to be in a particular order. Would you recommend somebody starting out
Oh,
to
like-
go with a bigger one like Image, or to try and self-publish?
My recommendation, honestly, as I said a little bit earlier, is with the world of the web, it's all about the eyeballs, in my opinion, because you can prove yourself, and we're talking, to give you an idea, when I started, we did a comic called Wayward Legends, or Wayward Sons Legends, but that's a whole nother ball of wax why it was called that originally. But Wayward Legends came out on KeenSpot, and we were consistent. That's the number one thing, is it teaches you consistency. You build up the audience. By the end, I think something like 62 million had read worldwide.
Wow.
And that's a massive audience. But it wasn't until we had a large base before we went and did our Kickstarter. Because otherwise, what a lot of people do is they rush to go do the Kickstarter. I mean, you got lucky, so great,
Yeah.
that's awesome. But I've seen, you know, for every one that makes it, I see like a dozen or more that fail. And that's because, like, who are you gonna market to? Kickstarter's not out there marketing like they used to.
Not unless you've already backed.
Right.
That's
yeah, you should. I mean, no one's waiting for your comic.
And also with like that being said about my Kickstarter, I'd already had I had 11 years of traveling the country, you know,
Yeah.
selling it, my art, my paintings and prints and stuff. So
You already
I already had a following,
Exactly.
and I didn't ask for an exorbitant amount of money. I asked for literally just enough to print it, not even enough to ship it. I had to pay out of pocket because I forgot about that. So, you know.
I did that too.
Yeah. So yeah, building your audience and building your chops, because you know no one's perfect at the beginning. You know, this art and writing and everything, you're gonna grow. Try not to look back. That's the other, because I don't think any of us up here looks back at their first stuff and goes, "Oh, I was perfect." You know, like that was great. I wouldn't change a thing. I know that's where a lot of people get hung up, is because a lot of times we as artists are perfectionists, and you look back and you go, "Oh, that's not good enough." Just keep moving forward. Think like Dory the fish. You know, just keep swimming. You know, you got to just keep going, and you'll find that you build an audience that way. I mean, you see now webtoons, for instance. There are comics on there that have millions and millions of views a day. It's ridiculous. And you only need, you think about a funnel, you only need a small amount of that read to actually convert to buy, and you can
Yeah, and getting your book like noticed like that, it can get very disheartening, because like I've worked in advertising forever, and like if I could guarantee a 3% click-through rate on an ad serve, I would like be creative director of the year. I mean, that's like ridiculous. So you'll see that like 250,000 people looked at your ad. You're lucky to get like 400 out of that. Like that would be astronomical. So it can get a little discouraging, but just know that it's like a reach and frequency. It's a consistency game. It's like you got to show people that you're committed to getting the product out there and building an audience before you ask them to start contributing. Like build some anticipation, build some interest, just build some awareness, because they need to see your ad like 7 times before they'll even go like, oh, that's right, that free book's coming out. Like I saw that. I've seen this ad like 9 times with that hot orange, you know, that song, you know, like. I think I literally saw images of your book like 4 or 5 times before I was like put it together. I'm like, oh, that's a comic coming out. I know that.
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
So
Take a million times.
It can get very disheartening when
To
you're
register in your head that this
Yeah.
it is what it is, and it's available.
There's a lot of visual noise. Yeah, exactly.
And then, do I want to buy it?
yeah.
yeah.
You got to build a case to compel someone to want to engage with you, and think what is engaging about your book whenever you're putting it together. And you should consider your audience when you're making it, right? Like even before, like in creation, you can kind of, who is this for? And don't say everyone, because nothing's for everyone. Yeah. So but figure out like that kind of thin slice, and the more you can speak to them in the language that is resonant with them and they'll understand, the more likely. But again, no one's waiting for your comic book at all. Like no one's waiting for new entertainment. I mean, how many times have you like recommended a Netflix show to someone you know would enjoy that exact Netflix show, knowing full well they have zero chance they're actually going to turn on that Netflix show, right? So it's hard to compel people to like invite new stuff into their world.
And the great thing is there is no gatekeeper but you now in the world of web. The hosting services are free, so it's kind of like all that it takes is your time at the drawing table or at the computer and stuff to put it together. And you can build that audience. I know also, by the way, as a publisher, I just hired 2 different writers who were writers on Webtoons, because I know I can't be the only publisher out there looking at Webtoons guys going, this guy's really got talent and he's got a massive audience, and I'd like him to write some of my stuff so I don't have to. I'm getting overloaded. So yeah, I mean, it is, that does happen, I know for a fact.
So is your overall question just about like, should you try to get like with a big publisher? I mean, if you go with a big publisher, you're only really going to learn how to do things their way.
Yeah. So
and
that's
like,
why,
and I guess the question is like, do you want to be an employee or do you want to be a creator?
Yeah.
Like,
because that's one of the pros and cons depending on where you, like,
I mean, if you want the security of a paycheck and you want like, you're never going to get health benefits, but if you at least want like to know that like monthly work is coming and that sort of thing, and not have to make like shipping decisions, like then like go with a publisher, like they'll take care of all that, but you lose a lot of control and you lose a lot of like
Then on the other end, like when I put my book out self-publishing, I could do it whenever I had free time. So I could make art, I could go tattoo, I could do whatever. But then when Scout picked it up, they're like, okay, we want it in the schedule. Okay, well I draw a comic book really slow because it's just, I do, it's the way I do it. And so for the first couple issues, I was catching this perfect wave where like I would be ahead of myself for once, and then I would hand it over to them and they would be like, oh great, this falls right when Diamond's gonna release their 4 months. And then by the 3rd issue, I had a lot of stuff that happened personally. I missed all of those perfect waves, and then I found out the hard reality of, oh, it got solicited and it was a month late. And crap, so the next time I give them a book, they're like, okay, we still want the book, but you're gonna have it done, lettered, printed, colored, everything ready to go before we even put it in Diamond. And I didn't know that when I first started doing it. I learned all this as I'm going. So you
how far ahead are you on books? A day and a half, maybe.
I'm months behind.
Oh,
I'm the latest person ever. I'm surprised people have not killed me.
Is that why you went to McFarland?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
I think it's important to be timely if you can.
But like, so we work with Image, which is kind of a publisher, but they're published through. Like, my book went out through Image as well. Like I did a version of mine that became a trade paperback that I kickstarted successfully. Because of its success, Image was interested in doing a version. My trade paperback is bilingual. The one we did for Image is English only and stuff. But so I have no idea what it's like to deal with Image because mine was done and ready to go as soon as they asked me.
Image, to work with Image, you gotta before they'll solicit your book, you gotta have 3 in the can.
Okay.
Because they had a lot of problems with late books, and I don't know if that's the official rule anymore, but you gotta have 3 issues done, which is really hard to do because
you're not getting paid
for an artist to do that. That's 6 months worth of work.
Well, you should know too, like just a small little note for you guys. If you do, if you're not self-publishing and self-distributing, if you decide to go through the direct market, you have to solicit the month or 2 months before. You get the numbers, they get printed and shipped. They don't get the money from the comic.
9 months.
Yeah, exactly. They don't get money from the shops until 2 or 3 months later, and then you don't get paid until that has cleared for like 30 days. So you can do all the work on a book, and yeah, you're looking at sometimes 6 to 9 months before you see money from when you created it to like when money actually enters. So being able to self-distribute has a little bit of benefit to it because you can get out on the road and start like going to shows and what have you. But just know that like any kind of big order numbers that's going to the direct market, it's a severe lag time on those. Image is a little better, but
Well,
you know.
I was in a fortunate position with Image because I got an advance.
Because you're a son of a bitch.
No, well, they don't give two craps about me, but because they knew Jason Aaron was writing it,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
knew it would move books. He's writing Avengers right now, Thor, all that stuff.
But even if you have a successful, because I'm like friends with John Layman, and I know that those start
He gets an advance sometimes.
sometimes,
Yeah.
and they start as the book starts to flag, those start getting dialed back
Yeah,
a bit.
yeah,
So,
that can happen.
yeah.
I can tell you one of the
Sorry, I
like,
shouldn't talk about
success almost killed White Widow, for instance. We did our Kickstarter, and then our numbers came in from Diamond, and all total, we were sitting around 75,000 circulation, which is just, it's a crazy amount. And again, Diamond doesn't, they don't advance anything.
Yeah, you gotta pay to print
So,
it,
then
and
we had to
ship
pay
it
to
to them,
print.
and it's gotta be double boxed in a certain size box and labeled a certain way. Yeah, it's a
And
whole-
we're like, oh God, where do we had done a Kickstarter, great, we raised like 70, 80,000 on Kickstarter, but that didn't fully cover the art for the next issue, because we also had the artists working on the next issue, and then even though we had gone to print, that had already sold out, and so we had to do a second print immediately. Well, so
And you
we're
still
having
pay the press setup fees for a second printing.
Yeah.
Are you doing like offset lithography, or you do digital printing?
it was offset.
Okay, yeah. So
Full
yeah.
offset.
So if you do a second printing on an offset book, which is a machine, it's not just printing it out like your printer, like an industrial version of that. If you have to do offset lithography, there's a press setup fee that if you do 10 books, it costs as much as doing 1,000 books almost,
Yeah.
because the press setup fee is going to be like $1,000 regardless. They have to, because a guy has to go out there and set these giant plates up and have
Your
it.
first 1,000 is
Yeah,
that's why if you do offset, you don't want to print less than 3,000.
Doesn't this sound exciting to
Yeah.
everybody? Don't you want to do
But
this now?
this is the real unsexy part. I mean, these are the, like, hey man, you want to make comics, you got to make really hard
It
decisions
is
about like,
completely passion.
yeah, like can you hit
There's a
those
lot of
schedules?
logistics.
Can you actually live off of? Because if you can only sell a comic book for so much money, right?
Yeah, sure.
Somewhere around like maybe $10 if you like want to do kind of a food truck pricing system where it's like I'm paying more because it's a mom and pop thing. But at the end of the day, you have to know like how many pages you can draw in a certain amount of time, and can you recoup that with the audience base that's there. So if it takes you 5 months to do a comic book, you better make 5 months worth of money when you sell that comic book. Otherwise, you're just going to be losing money, and or have another job or some other way to make income.
Well,
So-
that's
And
where.
go- But if you're gonna self-publish, you need to find a printer that you can afford, because the first time I did anything, I did a little tiny book, and I think I ended up paying $4.50 to print it. And I was selling it for $5 at shifts.
Oh my.
Because at the time I couldn't afford much, and so I'm making 25 copies of the book. It was a company called BAM Comics, I believe, out of
Oh,
Florida.
yeah.
Kablam.
Yeah.
Kablam. And so I'm paying, because I'm only ordering 25, 50 copies at a time, because my coffee table was level, so I didn't want to have to put anything underneath it to prop it. So like, I'm ordering these small amounts of copies at a time, and so each time I'm ordering them, the breakdown between the shipping of it to me, the cost of the printing, it's basically about $4.50, and so I'm selling it for $5, and God forbid I don't put them in bags and boards, or something happens and I damage a copy because
Well, and right now, the other thing too is where we initially printed was in China, which you have delivery time, even doing air and stuff, and now.
Oh yeah, that's like 3 months on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then depending on how the ports are backed up, which if you go out to California right now, there are lines of boats waiting to get into the country.
I have books, literally, we finally got caught up, and then COVID hit. Yay. And even though China was saying, oh no, everything fine, just we get, I think by air, 6 months our books were delayed, by air. I'm still waiting, they end up losing and they're now back in reprint, our hardcover and soft covers. So China's kind of gone off the table. We use Comic Impressions also down in Florida, but they're both offset and digital. So they're fairly
Yeah,
affordable.
most offset places will have some kind of digital
They do
component,
stuff.
Yeah.
But if you guys are interested, like talk to other people, ask them where they're getting their books printed, ask them how much it costs them, ask them, see the quality of them, see someone who's doing something you like, and ask them where they got it done. You know, that's a real. I mean, all artists, all we ever talk about is where did they get this printed at? How did they do this? How much did this cost? You know, like, it's like all we talk about is like nibs and brushes and where we got our stuff printed at. So
Yeah.
I find networking to be one of the most important things you could possibly do, whether it be comics or like any other type of professionals or think podcasting, whatever. Networking is the easiest way to avoid pitfalls and traps and trials and tribulations and all that
Don't
stuff.
ever think you're too big to listen to somebody.
Oh yeah,
Like
100%.
if you've got that like even if your personality is just strong, don't ever think you're too big. You're always replaceable.
Yeah.
So always listen to people because you'll find somebody that's going to do it faster and better, and they're going to know somebody that does it faster and cheaper. And then by the time you catch up to them or you figure it out on your own, they've already put out 3 books if you're doing that monthly.
Or even like, for instance, you think you're doing it the best, cheapest way, and then you go to Dragon Con is one of the best places I think to network because you literally never know who you're going to run into. And I always recommend when you network, don't network with the intention of like getting something out of it. Just have sort of like a natural kind of networking or conversation with the person, and then you can eventually ask questions. Normally, that's a lot easier way to sort of learn things, I find, than just like going up to a table and saying like, here's a list of questions I have, answer da 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 da. People don't like that one quite as much. But so let's say you think, I've got this the cheapest, easiest way, but then you might go to a Dragon Con and talk to somebody who's like, oh no, I actually know, I've worked with them before, I actually know a better one. And then you're making your life a little bit easier. Almost always there's always something you can improve on through networking. But one of the things that you guys have brought up a lot is distribution, and I'm really curious, what you think is the best way to distribute a comic, either coming to shows or trying to do it online. So for instance, like Matt, like how do you go about distributing your work? Is it just all through advertising and then you ship out what comes to you, or is it all like on show floors and cons? Like how do you do it?
I'm still learning.
Still learning?
Yeah, I mean, the latest books have been through Dark Horse,
Mhm.
and so it's through Diamond, that system, and then I just use social media and podcasts, interviews to get the word out, and now I'm doing shows. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out myself, honestly.
And like for us, it literally ended up, we had to, we rent a, I think it's 4,000 square foot house, because we couldn't find a warehouse. So our warehouse is a house that we've converted into a warehouse.
Oh my.
We've got 4 full-time people now who are doing the distribution, and it's a hybrid. My personal belief is never turn down anything. If literally 16 new distributors came in and said, "Hey, we were a distributor," I'm like, "Great," as many places. So we do direct. We do direct to retailers. We do
But if you're going to,
Walmart.com.
hold on, just really quickly. If you're going to go direct to retailers, they're going to expect some kind of discount, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you sell your comic for $5, retailers are typically going to want to buy it off of you. If it's got a cover price of $5, about half is what they'll be really comfortable with. If you're Marvel or DC, you can get up nearer to like 80-90%, but they expect to discount it when you wholesale it to a retailer. So again, you have to look at your price points. Sorry.
Yeah, so you have to have wholesale pricing. Shopify has been a real big boon. We use that. There are apps on Shopify. So for instance, wholesale pricing, and it's locked with another app. So someone comes in as a retailer, we give them the retailer tag, and then so not to get too much into minutia, but the short answer is the broader you want to go, the more options you have to look at, because like we're looking at joining Walmart.com right now. They gave us an invitation. Great. I don't care. Like anyone that's willing to give me money for my books, great. eBay, etc. Amazon has a bunch of stuff. So you kind of just have to do as many. Now the one thing I will say that's kind of an interesting formula that we've gotten is we do 3 books for, variant covers are a big thing for the collectible stuff. So we do an A, B, and C cover for the retailer, and it's $4.99, $9.99, and $19.99. And how we differentiate is it's a standard cover, then we do like a foil or a metallic ink for the $9.99 cover, and then we do a lenticular for the $19.99 cover. And by doing those special bells and whistles, we actually make the most money, believe it or not, on the $19.99. So while it is a niche thing, the retailers are willing to buy that because it's inherently a collector's item. And then at the same time, we do our Kickstarter editions. We still do Kickstarters. So we do Kickstarter editions. So those are other covers, other variants, other artists. And we also do on our online store.
Kickstarter itself is starting to beta test that fulfillment capabilities.
Yeah. And we do then exclusives for conventions. We've got a whole row of Dragon Con exclusives. We do online exclusives. So we're a big proponent of the variants. Just be aware that there is a bell curve. So we started out I think issue 1 ended up having over 100 variants. It's ridiculous. But now we're more around 10 to 12.
And one of the things that I've noticed is when you come to cons, people don't always jump on a book. They'll jump on your drawing or painting, but they don't always buy your comics. So a lot of these guys, especially anybody that's up here that's trying to just sell comics, that's a great way to distribute because you're meeting people that should be like-minded, but they're not always like-minded and willing to buy the book. They'll listen to you and they'll check out the book and look at it at the table, but they might not take one home. So something to keep in mind if you're going to start doing cons.
Yeah.
I was trying to get them to follow you on Instagram or something, or follow you
Yeah.
someplace, so you can at least start messaging them. Hey, this book is coming out. This
Yeah.
is coming out. Having an audience base built in. I mean, nowadays I think mailing lists are coming back as far as
Oh, really?
MailChimp, it's got
Mailing lists.
email marketing companies, but I mean, I grew up doing music, playing in bands, and going to see shows and stuff like that. So I had that mentality of you get out there and you boots to the ground kind of thing, and.
Yeah, start making phone calls. I mean, I did a book for Top Cow before my personal book came out, and in that we found out the 50 retailers that were most friendly to ordering our books. So when Lamano came out and I was doing my own thing, I literally got on the phone and just started calling dudes up. Hey, it's Jay Gonzo doing Mano del Destino. I was wondering how many units are you wanting to buy? And some of those guys just ordered more because I called them. I didn't even want to, I offered a digital preview. I'm like, hey, did you want to see the book before the final order cutoff happens? I'll send you a digital copy. You can read it, decide if it's going to be right for your audience or not. And some of those guys were like, oh, just because you called, I'm going to order 10 more, which is kind of cool. But other people, the cool thing about that is I sent a VOE transfer. You can see who downloads it. Every time someone downloads your link, you're like, oh, this guy actually took a look at it.
And if you're for myself again, when I did it myself or even through Scout, I'll still be on the road doing a show somewhere, and I'll go in a comic store and I'll ask them, hey, do you guys carry the Adventures of Byron on Scout? And it's hit or miss, but if they do say yeah, I try to do something nice for the shop, ask for a backer board and draw something, or if you got subscribers, I'll do that, because then that means that person feels special, so that the shop will order more. So just because you're there doesn't mean that it ever stops.
Right.
You can never stop promoting yourself or your book or however you do it. Again, if you care to do that, if it's not your thing and you just want to do one comic just to say you did it, then it's different.
You can make a comic and just sit there and wait for the world to be passed down to your door, but they're not going to.
They're not going to at all.
Unless you're Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Or Keanu.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I launched the same time as that goddamn book. I don't want to talk about it, man.
We have about 15 minutes left, so I want to get audience questions. So does anybody have a question? Feel free to raise your hand. We'll be happy to answer it for you. Right.
Yes, Steve Severs from media outlet Bionic Buzz. I interview a lot of comic book artists doing Kickstarters. A lot of them don't seem to factor in shipping and any other stuff, so a lot of them end up using money for pockets. I did one Kickstarter myself, same thing happened. I ended up losing a lot of money just shipping stuff out. Any other tips and stuff you can try to factor in, or I guess you don't want to have your Kickstarter too high because then you might not make it, and you know.
There's a book I recommend. So I can't remember the guy who wrote the book, but it's Code Monkey Saves the World or Universe. I forget exactly what the book is called, but it's basically a Jonathan Colton song that turned into a comic book. And this guy, all the comic books he's done on Kickstarter are like the most successful comics that went on Kickstarter. He wrote a book on how to have a successful Kickstarter.
That's awesome.
I took a look at it, and it talks about shipping. It talks about the first book you ever do, especially if you don't have an audience, you got to put the level real low. But you also need to start doing community stuff like social media. Instagram's big, even if you're just putting little, hints or like things like that. Just constantly posting things to try and build an audience. Tags are really important. But I highly recommend looking up. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. But if you look up Code Monkey Save the Universe, look up that guy. He's got a Kickstarter book. It's definitely super helpful. I can tell you from experience, the post office hates me because the art editor on my book, he's been in comics for about 15 years. He's like, you definitely need to figure out the shipping. So I went to the post office with a bunch of fake packages to figure out the weights and everything. I said, okay, how much will this cost to ship it domestic? Great. How much will it cost to ship it, international? Next package. And there was only one teller on a busy day. Nobody was happy with me. But I had a little list of all the prices and everything, so when I went to Kickstarter, it's like, okay, max price for international shipping, that's what I'm just going to set for the international. Max price for domestic, same thing.
Kickstarter now thankfully does have shipping on the Kickstarter.
Oh,
That
nice.
was another thing that they didn't used to. But also bear in mind not just the cost of shipping, but factor in your bags, your boards, your packaging, all of that, because it's not just your shipping.
Yeah, then I
stuff.
tried to order boxes just to ship mine, thinking I could go to like a box store, packaging store, to special order them from the specific shipping company, and the shipping company took 3 weeks to get it to me. Like their business is shipping, and it took that like nearly a month to get it. So
They just
get that
factor
locked in, maybe sooner rather than like anything you think is like, oh, it's a trip to the store. Maybe make sure you have a source for it before you pull the trigger on your Kickstarter, because they can easily, especially in the time of COVID, they can all just go away. Like the business, like, oh, the one company in America that did that just went out of business, and now everything comes from Canada or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So,
And factor how long it's going to take you to package everything, because that's another thing. Like, I found, and actually this is an incident that I had with my book when I did my Kickstarter. People are so under the impression that everything works like Amazon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
literally had somebody send me a nasty email because I was like, look, I'm on the road. I'm God knows where at this point in time. Your book will ship in a week and a half when I get back. And they're like, well, I ordered it at this point in time. I was like, that's awesome. Thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. But they're like, why is it taking you so long to do this? I'm like, well, I'm on the road and I got to get back and package all this stuff and I'll ship it out to you. Their response was, well, Amazon does it in 2 days. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. So what I did is I shipped them their comic and I put a $5 bill, what they pay for it, in the envelope and sent it back to them. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. By the way, I found out the hard way. Jokes on the internet don't always land.
You don't say.
Sarcasm especially. So I had people were understandably upset because we were having the 6-month delay from Kickstarter. From China for our Kickstarter, and finally the first of many packages arrived in, and I'm all happy, I'm excited, I post an update with a picture of it and go, hey, look, it's starting to come in, so hopefully the rest of the stuff will be in here shortly, we can start sending everything out. And of course, it's the internet, so there's, I don't know if you know this, there's some snide people on there. And they go, oh, great, so another 5 months we'll get our stuff. So me trying to diffuse with humor, I go, well, if you want, we can delay yours for 5 months, that can be arranged. Not the right response. Everyone lost their mind. So yeah, just be aware that
You
I thought it was an obvious joke, but
just don't get on the internet.
Just don't leave a comment, huh?
But to that point though, be open and transparent with any delays or problems that you're having. Like, try to stay out ahead of those. Don't just go silent. If you're running a Kickstarter for stuff, or even if you're self-publishing and like snags happen, you've got all their addresses and or an ability to communicate with them. So be like, hey, this snag happened, that snag happened, it's being worked on. And people are understanding. I think people get frustrated when they're just not being communicated with. When
People love constant updates.
yeah, when they gave you money and then like they just haven't heard from you for 9 months.
Yeah, if you ghost so I've done a couple Kickstarters like where I backed it and then the person just disappears and then a year later they're like, oh, by the way, no, and then they just they just took the money and ran at that point. That's one of the more difficult things about Kickstarters I find is that people are kind of leery about it because you do get burned. I forget the exact percentage. It's like 47% of like projects that do get
And
backed.
keep in mind too, a lot of comic book people burn people. So like, just know that you're going in there with like kind of almost a suspicious crowd. So
Sure.
try to diffuse those fears as much as you can.
Any other questions while we're here?
Hi, my name is Wells Thompson, comic book writer. Just finished a successful Kickstarter, so yeah. And I did a bunch of stuff wrong, but and that aside, I was curious what you said. You know, you ran a Kickstarter and then went to a con. Scout was there, and they noticed the book and they were interested in it. What cons or doesn't have to necessarily be in the area, but do you typically see more publishers at? Those are the ones that I go to. Mostly artists.
Tell you that any of the ones that I can almost guarantee I've seen a publisher at are done by Read Pop, which are the people that do New York Comic Con, Chicago C2E2. They're doing SuperCon next week in Miami, but they're one of the larger ones. Fan Expo
They
has
do
publishers there.
Emerald City,
Yeah,
New York,
Emerald City's huge.
C2E2, Florida SuperCon.
They just bought Wizard.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
SuperCon
That's
is
a
a Read
cool
Pop.
thing, it's for sure.
Yeah, they own everything now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fan Expo's.
But honestly, dude, it doesn't just go to shows because you never know. Because I was like at I was at a single day show at a Lucha Libre specific store in Pasadena, and a WB exec just so happened to come in and like buy stuff because she was Latina and wanted to see like all this Lucha Libre stuff. I didn't even know it. I sold her books, and then later on they're like, "Oh, that girl's about to become an exec at WB." And it's just like, so you don't know. I mean, you could be at some dumb library show in Odevote, Iowa, and just some exec from HBO was in town visiting his parents, and was like, "Oh, comics, I like that," and went out there. So just, but also just go to shows to sell your book. Don't worry about like, I mean, people will see it, they'll get back to you. And honestly, those guys like. Bigger things, they send people out to go buy stuff, so you never even know who the hell you're talking to. Just treat everyone like they're the head of television or the head of movies, you know what I mean? And you'll be fine.
One little quick thing I wanted to mention as well is even before and after you make it, break in and stuff, I'm also a firm believer of go to your local comic book stores, support them. You can set up signings and events with those yourself. You don't have to wait to be invited. You can literally show up. I literally just set up, before coming up here, I have 2 shows in the Orlando area, which is where I'm based, where I'll be doing to support those shops. And they'll literally buy your stuff in advance for them to sell for whenever you come in. So yeah, that's also a great way to build your audience, as we've been talking.
We got time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
So I heard you guys talk a lot about Kickstarter. Do any of you consider Patreon as well?
I did a Patreon page, and again, I did the whole grassroots, boots to ground, handout stuff. I had not enough time between traveling, family, tattooing, things like that, to dive straight in 100%. I know people that make a killing off Patreon. I made peanuts, which was fine. I was just more impressed that people even cared to give me something, but it's a great avenue, but it's another full-time job. So for me, I had to decide, okay, I've only got so much time in a day to draw my book, to paint paintings, to spin with my daughter, that kind of stuff. What was the most important for me? So I ended up canceling my Patreon after a year of having it, but I gave out 10,000 postcards, 10,000 bookmarks, all with the information on it, and I had links on everything. It was out there, and I thought a lot, but it wasn't enough when it came down to it.
Yeah. It also, I would say you're better off these days, since everything seems to be going to video. Another thing is, doing live streams and live drawing events and things, if you're an artist, or live sales, and building that rapport with people is far more interactive and beneficial than doing a Patreon. We've looked at it, into it. It felt a little bit too much for us. Like either you're asking for a handout, or you're having, like you said, to put so much effort and so much time into it, and who knows? Yeah.
I have a friend that does Patreon. He's pretty well known in indie comics. He makes about $1,000 a month on his, and he really doesn't do any extra work. So he's making his work anyway, and what he'll do is do a little documentation of it. And I think if you do it efficiently, it might be worth your time.
Consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know some people that are like, they have a drawing every month for a free sketch from all their, and I think you can get sucked in that hole to where you're putting time into the Patreon. I would avoid that. I might do one. I'm kind of useless and lazy, so I don't know if I will. I barely get shit drawn. And I hear everybody talk about going to the post office, and I'm not doing any of that. If you can delegate any of this stuff, do it, because there are people that are professional, and if you're an artist or writer, you need to be drawing or writing. You don't need to be, if you can reduce your time doing everything else, do that. But a Patreon, especially if you have like a big Instagram following or whatever, and you can leverage that into a Patreon, give it a try. I think it's low risk if it bombs, right?
But I think you're selling a certain amount of exclusivity to something. I think that's kind of the tacit agreement between you and Patreon subscribers, is that like you're giving them access to something that no one else can.
Right.
I could never figure out what I do that would be that, especially on like some kind of mass level. I mean, I have like some secret handshakes. Like secret handshake stuff is great for example was like I don't sell licensed material. Like I don't draw, like I don't have prints of Batman or Superman. I only do my book. But warm-up drawings, I'll do little doodles of like random whatevers, and I'll take a photo of it and I'll post it on Instagram. It'll be like a little dumb doodle of like Wolverine or something, and it goes into what I call my $5 super secret envelope of doodles, and I just put it, and it's an envelope of these I just stick them all in an envelope and I bring them to shows. The only way you can get them is to come see me at a show and ask to see the $5 super secret envelope of doodles, and then for $5 you can have anything in there or nothing or whatever, or you can buy 2 or 3 if you want to. But it's a fun little, like, only people who follow me on social media know that even exists, let alone what might possibly be in the envelope, and they have to come see me to do it. So not only does it give them some kind of exclusivity, but it drives them to come see me at a show. So I think if you could do that with something with Patreon that gives them some kind of exclusivity, makes them feel part of a club, but then also drives them to the thing that is going to pay your bills, that's probably a smarter move. But then again, people can sell stuff on Patreon that I've never even thought of. I could never figure out what that would be in my particular world that would give them exclusivity, but would also help me in the long run.
So we have to wrap up, but I want to touch on that because our show gets about $1,000 a month, and the easiest thing I can tell you is steal. Or what I mean is, look at what other Patreons are doing, and then like, ooh, that's a good idea. Maybe nab that. You don't even have to have a whole bunch of levels like my crazy Patreon, where we do way too much stuff for our weird crazy fans. You can do something like people like behind the scenes access. So even if you just record a video of yourself, like 5 minutes talking about whatever project you're working on, that is like super low effort. Just upload it to Patreon. People love that stuff. The one thing that was recommended to me by a guy named Brian Ibbett, he's known as like one of the godfathers of podcasting. He said, do not ever on your Patreon give away items, because that's another thing that you are losing money on, because you have to make a thing, you have to spend more time to make it, you have to send it out, ship it, all that stuff. Everything should just be digital content that is as low effort as you can do. So like, for instance, we do bonus episodes. Yeah, it's a little bit of effort, but it's not anything it doesn't cost us anything but time to do that. Discord, people love Discord. It's like it also helps you build your community. And then when you do have projects like Kickstarter, they're the first ones to jump on and like support and all that stuff. And if you have a successful Instagram, they just feed into one another. So look at what other people are doing in a similar vein that are successful, and then see what ideas jump out at you as like, ooh, I like that idea, but I want to do something a little bit different with it or something like that. But avoid itemizing your Patreon. That's the easiest, because that's a pitfall everybody falls into. It was one of the first ideas we had, and it was immediately like squashed. They were like, no, don't do that. But so we're about to wrap up. I just want to give everybody a minute to sort of talk about what they're working on or anything like that. So Chris, let me end.
Obviously, we're all here at the convention, so you can just come out to the booth. It's by the women's bathroom. That's the easy way to find it. You can come by design. Yeah, it was shown that it's Patreon exclusive.
Only fans.
So yeah, just come out. You can yap with me there because I don't take up too much time. But Adventures of Byron through Scout. Though I do want to say one thing, and it's kind of a little pitch. Table number 107 has got a Scout booth at it. Scout's got a little booth set up with somebody else. They're selling trade paperbacks. Anybody that buys anything from Andrea over at table 107 gets a free copy of the Byron comic. So you guys can go do that. And then again, before I leave, I've got posters up here for anybody that wants one to come grab one. So please do.
Yeah, I'm the Absolute book booth is 225, so I'm in the second row, behind him, the women's restroom side. So feel free to come out. I gave out to the people earlier. If you did not, if you came in later and did not get one of these books, come by and see me quick. I think they're literally just enough for those of you who came in late. I'll give you for free. And anyone who wants them signed, just come by booth 225. Signatures are free. You can also get them signed by Jamie Tyndall. He's right there in the corner, you know, where he belongs. So he's the co-creator, so he can sign as well.
Steven?
What are we supposed to talk about?
What are you working on?
What are you promoting, man? What's your booth number?
Come by my table, give me your money. I've got a boat payment to make.
What's your booth number?
It's like the first one in the.
Yeah, I'm in the first. I can't remember the number. I'm in the very first thing.
Which bathroom are you by?
I'm right when you walk in our room. I'm right in the front.
He's what you call the
Yeah. I'm drawing Hellboy right now. I just finished Sea of Stars, the last page. So I'm doing a Hellboy thing, and I'm doing something else later. I can't talk about, but yeah. The only thing I'll say about indie publishing and stuff, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think if you really focus on making great work, something good will happen. That's what I think. I know, like, I don't know if people will just come out of the woods to find you, but I kind of do think that actually, I don't know anybody that's like a stone cold badass that doesn't get paid, you know? So yeah, it's complicated, it's intimidating to talk about all this shipping and stuff, and it's hard, and you got to do all that, but if you just really make something awesome.
One quick little aside too, and hopefully you guys see this here. The one thing that I love the most about this industry is you don't find very many people who have the mindset of competition. We're peers.
Yeah, it's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
we
all
love
different
one another. We
things.
love this stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, the intangible is that like people smell the love coming off of something, and like if you're looking like if you're in this business to make money, find another business. Yeah, so don't worry about like what do I do with my millions of dollars? Like just worry, like Steve would say, just worry about making something you love, because that's the thing that's going to sell your book. People just sense the love coming off it, and they can smell a money grab from a mile away.
Yeah. So and the things that he, as he's saying that you might worry about, just ask us, ask your peers.
You can sort the rest of it out. Yeah, make the thing you
We'll
love.
help.
Sort the rest. The rest will sort itself out. I'm in booth 424. If you like Lucha Libre stuff, I'm over there. 424.
I'm in 314 selling comics, and I have a new sketchbook with all my commissions and stuff like that in there. So if you want to check it out, feel free. If not,
I think
you don't have to.
109.
And then, so I'm on the internet as the world's most okayest DM. If you guys want to come see a Family Feud style battle between two D&D podcasts tonight in the Hilton, 10 o'clock, they'll probably be drinking. I hope we don't lose because somebody bought something real awful for us to drink. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. in the Crystal Ballroom of Hilton, we're doing our live D&D show, which will be absolutely insane. And then my last thing is, like I said, I launched my first comic book Kickstarter on Friday. It's called Lycan Solomon's Odyssey. It's about the world's first werewolf. An idea I had about 10 years ago, then shelved it because I didn't think it was going to be a real possibility. And then I came to my first Dragon Con, and everybody I pitched it to loved the idea and told me I should run with it. And yeah, as they were saying, it's a passion project. Even if nobody buys it, I'm going to still make it because, yeah. So basically my job,
There you go.
my normal day job just pays for me to make this. So any support, I would love it. Like I said, my dream is to have it funded before the end of Dragon Con, so we'll see. We're about halfway there. So, and if you have any questions about Patreon, let me know.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.